First up, Star Wars Outlaws. This comes out on August 30th for everything but the Switch. We're almost here. Countless previews and interviews and showings of this in events. It's a third-person, somewhat open planets game that looks to really hit hard on the non-Jedi aspect of the universe. Deep diving into skullduggery and stealth, bad deals gone worse, and good deals with just bad results. Larger and smaller jobs have different styles of work that you can take on as well. It hits with that feeling of scoundrel better than I've felt in a long time. Each syndicate and group works differently, and handling their jobs raises or lowers your standing with them, all fitting the Outlaws' ideals. But you can double-cross them as well, or double-cross them, I assume. They also state that because of the way the Star Wars universe works and the type of character you are, you can always expect to be in and out of one of the good graces of one of the groups. Everything is generally seamless. You can play games on one planet, fly off, and engage in missions on another planet without anything getting in the way. I have a feeling it's going to stick that, and we don't get some black screen, which is something they stated wouldn't happen. They've also broken down the size of the planet and how all that's going to work. And I think the real issue I have with this is that Star Wars Outlaws has a possible problem with its messaging. This is one of the smaller open worlds in their stylings and something that they've actually discussed when it comes to how long it takes to cross on the various vehicles. But it's open planet with barely any guidance as well, but they also want it to be a personal story about exploration. That's a lot. Each video they do with each different developer group has actually sounded a little bit like a different game from each one of them. This feels like perhaps they're trying to take that middle ground approach, which is actually laudable. It can work. Jury's out though. It's still one of the most looked forward to games in August, especially if they can figure out how to make it feel large enough to feel like Star Wars, but also reward exploration like they say is possible, but not also feel convoluted, which is a Ubisoft staple. They have taken two specific ideas to heart. The first is a little bit like Far Cry Primal and a couple other games. They're attaching skills to experts. So like Primal, if you ever played that one, you're going to find specific masters at skills to initially learn a skill from. Then from that point on, much like Starfield, you'll have to perform challenges to level those skills up and get new abilities with them. These challenges are related to the skills in much the same way you expect, meaning if you want to raise the ability of your speeder, you may have to hit huge jumps. Ubisoft has said that their hopes is that this would make players think more about exploration and changing how they feel about the game world. This didn't hit as well with Bethesda fans, though, and wanting those skill challenges to be connected is just something we're going to have to see to believe. And I like the idea in theory, but many titles, they just have these odd challenges for every single thing, requiring a player to actually, instead of exploring, simply looking around for the easiest way to complete a challenge. In fact, many times paying less attention to the world versus the countdown on the challenge counter. If they can nail it, if they can make the world have a larger impact on the skills, I'm all for it. But I gotta tell you, if you have to cook 30 alien egg omelets in various kitchens to be able to make a full waffle and eggs breakfast for more health, it's gonna go down like a stripper in a back room. Massive is one of Ubi's best developers, so here's to hoping. August 30th. Next up, Monster Jam Showdown. This is on the 29th for PC, consoles, and Switch. Listen, monster trucks are not complex. You get a vehicle, you put huge tires on it, and then jack it full of a roided out engine big enough that Elon Musk probably wants to strap it to a rocket. Then you throw four-wheel drive and steering on it, and actually that's not super basic, but you get the idea. Monster Jam Showdown is another title on a long list, a bit like NFL games or baseball or basketball that come out very often. But Monster Jam Showdown is adding changes to the weather systems, heavy rains and blizzards, and more to drive through with 7 different modes, full destruction tracking, and the big names in monster truck racing like Gravedigger, Megalodon, and other titles your uncle called his package in the 1980s. But I got to admit, I like these things. They're pretty shameless. Just go out and race or tear ass through the countryside and in arenas. This is a huge sport, it's a wild one, and the games, while not always delivering the feel perfectly, have stepped up the graphics since the originals, and these weather effects here look good. They have 140 total truck versions across all the mains, as well as a career mode and multiplayer team-based and split screen. Listen, this might not be for you, but there's something about a person putting all their cards into a vehicle that looks like stuff we played with as a kid when we were 3, and it gets 0.2 miles per gallon, and then tries to turn it into a low-orbit vehicle just because they can. And I am all for that. Next up, Deathbound, August 8th for everything but the Switch. If you're like me, the idea of another Souls-like probably either doesn't get you too excited or maybe even causes a little bit of genre fatigue. We're now in peak saturation where we even have narrative games say that they offer Souls-like discussion trees. However, Deathbound is offering something a little different, a third-person Dark Souls-style title where you collect souls in the game world, essentially becoming a party-based Souls-like in a world where science and magic have cataclysmically smashed together. You can instantly transform between the souls that you've collected with each having their unique skill sets, combat styles, and you can all do it in real time during the fight. Basically, a class system attached to the skin cards that are littering the game world. Just like you would expect, not all of them are happy about the situation, and by absorbing their souls, you inherit all their abilities, but also their historical conflicts and synergies, meaning you have to play them off and their memories and narratives and powers against one another. How that'll fully play out isn't quite known yet, but it's obvious that synergies and debuffs, depending on who you have and when, as well as casting Morph Strikes, which is the combined power of everybody that you have on your team, how that all plays out, I'm excited to see. It's just one of those titles that we really want, at least for me, a game that, if it's going to do a Souls-like, does throw everything to the wind and try something new. And I feel like Deathbound probably will be. Black Myth Wukong. PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S later, and PC. This is from Game Science. Comes out August 20th. Simian Souls, Elden Ape. Yes, I know apes aren't the same as monkeys, but let's go with that one. Dark Simians. It's hard to think that anyone doesn't at least know about Black Myth by now, but let's set a couple records straight as well. So Black Myth Wukong, it's an action RPG rooted in Chinese mythology. The story is based on Journey to the West, one of the 4 great classical novels of Chinese literature. Since it was first announced, Black Myth has gone between being vaporware to, oh my god, this game looks amazing, to, oh crap, monkeys can't play Xbox games apparently. Bad news aside, Black Myth Wukong is a mix of Devil May Cry and Dark Souls. It's an open hub-based game of myths and legends with you taking on tons of bosses, more than 100 that we know of, and their henchmen through ancient Chinese mythology. Its focus is on the action and reaction without the specific and exactness of Dark Souls games. This is a game that harkens back a bit more towards player agency and instant choice when it comes to navigation, and is closer to Elden Ring in that way as well. Also, as you would assume, monkeys can cast spells. You got spells, transformations, and magic vessels of all types. These can be used to augment your main weapon and adjust the way you fight. A good combat staff, actually, various staffs, are the way you fight here. Techniques that you can use to freely combine different spells and abilities, and possibly weapons, we'll just have to see, but as well as equipment that you find around the game world will get you from the start to the end. Now, while some players may want different weapons, the developers have seemingly decided to instead embrace one weapon with the staff so that specific abilities are available for every single build, while summons and powers adjust the abilities and graphically alter it. There may be more weapons, but so far, other than those abilities which graphically can change things, they haven't seemed to show any. And you can't say they haven't done an incredible job with the staff work. It isn't about hitting, it's about everything intrinsically tied to the myths and abilities of mythical staff users. For example, climbing to the top of your staff to ignore low attacks that pass below you, or spinning it to create whirlwinds and deflect incoming attacks. However, they've actually also made sure to make it so that there's a huge number of actions you can take by moving to a stance system, with more stances opening up as you level up, those stances changing moves and abilities with hop swapping seemingly capable. Now let's crush one thing here. While many gamers for some reason assumed Black Myth is a boss rush title, it absolutely isn't. It's got fleshed out world with enemies to fight before you get to the bosses, and between them all, each location having their own enemies to battle, and if you need to learn how to use the various spells and items, more than 50 that you have. Even preview events have had testers hitting consistently different bosses depending on which direction they take through the initial opening area. Massive forest, mountain regions, and huge amounts of traversal using flying mounts are all here. I can't wait for Black Myth. It looks amazing. Its combat looks like a great middle ground, and the idea of a title from a completely different developer stepping into this arena and being able to watch it go from trailer to now has been really awesome. You know it's got a chance when even devs from other titles in the sphere say it's the one they're looking forward to. Also, fun fact, Enslaved Odyssey of the West also had a Monkey King, and though it remains to be cleared up if the character here is the Monkey King or just some really kick-ass monkey, he seems pretty damn cool regardless. Next up, Star Wars Bounty Hunter, the remaster. PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Switch, PC, pretty much everything by Aspire Media. This is on the 1st of August. So June of this year, Lucasfilms announced this remaster of Star Wars Bounty Hunter to the combined internet's reaction of, what? The original game from decades ago was set in the Star Wars Legends expanded universe. The title followed Jango Fett during his prime as a bounty hunter, fleshed out his life prior to the Attack of the Clones, including how he got the clothes iron on its ass spaceship Slave One, and also covered how he was chosen as the genetic template for all the clone troopers. The game follows Fett after being hired by Lord Tyrannus to kill a Dark Jedi, and of course he gets in over his head. The interesting thing here is, again, the initial put-to-bed Star Wars Legends expanded universe just keeps coming back in fits and starts, and I'm all for it, though it's best to remember that Bounty Hunter didn't get the best scores when it came out, averaging somewhere around 70%. Luckily, or maybe not luckily, a number of those issues were technical and camera issues, collision detection, and clipping. This could also be fixed with a remaster, which is what I'm excited for, and maybe change what we end up getting. Especially as a third-person shooter, it's going to be required as the competition in this genre is packed. A game that's not throwing things to the wind, but is changing things up a bit is Visions of Mana. This is the 5th main title in the Mana series and is scheduled to release on August 29th. It's for all systems but the Switch and the Xbox One original, from what I can see. Now, this marks that first mainline title in the series in 15 years, returning with a whole new look and a lot of new systems. So anyone who hasn't really choked on a biscuit and died between the original time and now may want to look into this. And so far with some previews, it looks like this one might actually move the entire series into the future, or at least into today. You play as the main character Val, who's a soul guard tasked with protecting his childhood friend who's chosen by some creatures to go on a quest to restore the Tree of Mana to get that sweet, sweet mana juice flowing through the world again. Now, the game's got a somewhat open world design, has you traipsing across huge locations in a way that reminds me a bit of Xenoblade Chronicles, and a bit of that leaking into battles as well in real time, with the ability to switch out characters between your three instantaneously, while the two others continue to fight in the background, using their skills and abilities on their own, and able to come together in massive combos. Now, this isn't new stuff. The 1 in the front, 2 in the back has been a thing since Menage a Trois were invented, but for Mana, this presentation style is a whole new ballgame, including the ability to explore that open world on a steed. Much of the combat changes, though, and strategies seem to be built around the game's vessel system. These are massively powerful items, and depending on who wears what, can drastically change the character's skills. Graphically, the game is still going for a very cartoony look, hitting right in the middle ground of more current-looking appearances, but also trying to nail the nostalgic look, and in some way reminds me of a more recent Genshin Impact, but more detailed. Before people get mad about that, I'm sure there's other comparisons to be made. But what that does mean is huge bug enemies and main characters with eyes the size of soccer balls. It's not going to appeal to everybody, but I love the idea of a new Mana game, and hey, it might end up appealing to you. Next up, SteamWorld Heist 2, August 8th. So SteamWorld Heist was awesome. It was a steampunk-styled Worms game with a full crew as you traveled around doing different jobs. The sequel, From Thunderfall, has you playing as Captain Li Wei and pieces together the crew trying to take on a larger and sequel proper, bigger enemy. Of course, that means throwing different weapons and abilities on everybody, bouncing explosive off the domes of dudes from 2 degrees, and then leaping into the real-time naval combat in the overworld map. Means constantly looking for crews, items, and upgrades. SteamWorld Heist 2 has a large job system, over 150 weapons you can collect and items for upgrading your ships. It's all backed up by a big story and tons of choices you can make on who to help and what alliances to create and how you handle them. SteamWorld Heist, as I said, I really liked, and it looks like the sequel's absolutely building on everything that made the original game special. We don't know a ton about this one other than it's SteamWorld Heist 2, and I think most people, that's what they wanted. Dustborn, August 20th, developer Red Thread Games. This looks like it's coming out on pretty much everything as well. Now, Dustborn, let's just read the Steam listing. It's a single-player, story-driven action-adventure game. You play Pax, exile con artist, and Anomile with the ability to weaponize language. Looking for a new life and a way out, Pax has been hired to transport an important package from Pacifica to Nova Scotia across the justice-controlled American Republic. You travel the world pretending to be a punk band. The previews for this game are about as disjointed as this Steam listing. It's like the ideas were put together by someone who believes in horoscopes and ley lines and watches a lot of CW shows. However, what I've seen does interest me. The previews haven't been a great deal better, though. I swear it feels like everyone who has previewed this is either confused or played a different game than the next person. But it's ultimately a team-based yarn and an alternate history where you cruise around in a robotic self-driving tour bus, taking on missions and hiring new members as you take one big job to rule them all. A heist-like road trip across the shattered states. I just realized the more I think about it, it's basically a dire Scooby-Doo series mixed with that old 1980s cartoon Jim where somehow all the girl pop band members were secret agents. Here, though, each of the characters have their own powers. You battle it out with the different groups that are trying to stop you from escaping and want whatever it is that you're carrying. And also somehow you have a magical power related to your voice like Skyrim. It looks as weird as it sounds, some kind of Borderlands Telltale Games bastard child of odd combat smashing people in the face with baseball bats. But I like where they're going with it. I love games like this, and sometimes you'll get a title that actually comes together offering so many odd bits that they feel like a totally unique experience. Though I have to say, you're constantly being hounded on your way to Nova Scotia, which seems really odd, as I don't know why Nova Scotia would be randomly safe. That's like saying Oklahoma is totally safe because north of Texas just has less guns, which seems a bit short-sighted. Tactical Breach Wizards, August 22nd, from Suspicious Developments. turn-based XCOM style game with a squad of, well, you guessed it, magic users. Made by the devs who made Gunpoint and Heat Signature, Tactical Breach Wizards is a turn-based tactics game in which you lead this team of renegade wizards, all dressed in Kevlar, as they unravel a modern conspiracy plot and or find the most stylish way to punch a traffic warlock through a fourth-story window. At least that's what the Steam description says. You're a team of wizards in a futuristic world that plays out in isometric levels. It mixes magic with heavy firepower. Each of your wizards has unique sets of abilities, from elemental attacks to transforming into wild dogs. I mean, one of them has a spell to send a spectral Toyota truck and Segway slamming into the enemies, so be warned. While other games have had a plethora of side missions like Midnight Suns, consistent calls to help everybody out, Tactical Breach Wizards instead moves customizables to side objectives, which seems like a hugely beneficial way of keeping players engaged and not feeling like they're missing real content unless they want a fancy hat for their wizard. I love games like this, but at times it can look like an easier genre to get right, but we've seen a ton of games come and go and miss the fundamentals or misunderstanding just how much a player will care about something the developer thinks is cool. Something about Tactical Breach Wizards sort of feels like it's flipped the other way around, where the core gameplay is the meat, including a deeper dive into the tactical gameplay choices of the team. Understanding that players want that and don't need to spend an hour in a fucking book club with Blade or going smokeless with another superhero at the local hot springs is awesome to me. There's a demo out there if you want to check it out. And here's a game I do want to check out that surprised me when I saw it, and that is Supermoves. It's out August 28th for PC. While these kind of games aren't unknown, the couple that explode, even if they are on the backs of Twitch streamers pretending they're losing their minds in every single action that's just a normal emotion, is still fun to see. So a game that promises to be a mix of mini games, Mirror's Edge, and Bomb Tag with 40 players got my attention right away. It's not just that. With the demo, you can see that there's something pretty magical here, including them throwing their own complete level and game maker mode into it that you can make your own levels with right away. It reminds me a bit of the first time I saw Trackmania and thought, yeah, nah. And then years later, it's used for YouTube shorts of Mark Cuban randomly talking about money and speed runs that speak to expertise of thousands of hours. It's got 8 game modes, a full single-player career, tournaments, and can be played in first and third mode. It also has a lot of levels that have some butt-clenching heights to them. And with that, of course, you have your wall running, your sprinting, flipping, and using trampolines to get across it. You can make your own tournaments with a mix of them all. And I love the idea of being able to customize this kind of stuff and put your own tournaments together in your own styles. The inclusion of that map and gameplay editor right off the bat sounds fantastic too, especially for people who want to make nefarious levels that challenge everybody to the point of flipping their desks over. And that reminds me of the next title, actually, I want to talk about, and that's Squirrel with a Gun. This is August 29th for PC. It's by DD Creations. And I swear this game has a better story than a lot of major RPGs we see. It starts with a story about a squirrel in a top-secret lab accidentally eating a hard drive that looks like an acorn, has low-level human intelligence, and he carries a crapload of weapons to kill the agents that are coming to get his nuts. That's high on my list right away. Violence, puzzles, upgradable weapons, entire puzzle rooms, and a massive sandbox world. The trailers for this game just look hilarious, almost in that Goat Simulator style of ways, but somehow the squirrel is cooking even more, and the humans are going to be cooked. A game that is right up my alley. Squirrel with a Gun. And lastly, let's end this with a bit of an honorable mention. Unrooted, PC, August 2nd. That's a release date so far, but there's not a lot of data about this. This one caught my eye when I read Precision Platformer. It's got a look that's a bit like a lower budget Ori and the Blind Forest style, but the developer is going with a game that is absolutely crushing in its difficulty and required precision. Every location is a puzzle where specific leaps are exacting, and deaths and successes are autosaved, and the game takes a tongue-in-cheek idea of teasing you for all your failures. Not much is known about this, but the trailers and the idea and just the thought of teasing you for your failures sounds like it could be cool. The graphics don't hurt it as well because it looks really nice. This is a title that says August 2nd. I'm going to go with that for now, but who knows? Just something you might want to put on the list. What did I miss? Throw it in the comments. Subscribe. It helps the channel. Join. Come into the Discord. Check out the podcasts. These videos every single month. That's it. Spiel over. No sponsors. Peace out.